Well, I do think that this finally happening is pretty important. He
Here he
does
comes.
like it, and I
Hold
think
on one
it's really
second, Abby. Let's just watch.
Yeah.
Let's just watch for 1 second as he and the First Lady exit. She looks lovely in a white ensemble, as we saw the Duchess of Cornwall as well. And they are now all greeting each other warmly, shaking hands. I cannot lip read. However, it looks like a warm and formal meeting.
There's been a lot of speculation about what will happen behind closed doors between the Prince of Wales and the President. The Prince of Wales has taken on climate change as his cause célèbre, as the main issue of his public life, I would say. And there are those wondering if that will come up when the two meet privately. Not now. That's not happening now. This is more ceremonial, to be sure.
That is a great point. I mean, that people feel that Prince Charles would be remiss if he...
We're getting a little bit of reverb here in the studio.
A strange audio moment. Okay, thank you. Prince Charles would be remiss if he somehow omitted the cause that has become so important to him when he meets with, the leader of the United States. And again, you see the First Lady and the Duchess of Cornwall. I have begun to think that the women coordinate their outfits, John, because it looks so lovely when they wear the same color. And I have seen this now several times. I've begun to think that there's an advanced team that really goes to work here.
I will say the men did also. They're both wearing business suits today.
Suits, you're right.
And there she is, the Queen. Queen Elizabeth. Max, just walk us through the ceremonial greeting here, the do's and don'ts of what you say and don't say.
So that handshake there represents the official opening of this state visit, also greeting the First Lady there. Next, we'll have the national anthems. I believe the American national anthem will play out first, and then the British national anthem. They're going to go inside for a brief moment. That hasn't been fully explained to me yet. They're going to go inside, and then we're going to have the official guard as well. There'll be the guard of honor. And we'll also have that moment where the president will be invited to inspect the guard. You remember what happened last year, guys, when it was slightly awkward, where he walked in front of the Queen, seen as a bit of a faux pas. But to be fair to him, Prince Philip would normally have carried out that role. The Queen wasn't completely aware of what to do either. So we're going to see that guard of honor soon, and we're going to see the national anthems as well.
There's the gun salute, we believe. Did I hear something?
Or it could have just been a bang.
Or they could have just been slamming the door, Abby. Who knows? But
Guns. Let's listen for 1 second. So 241 gun salutes and then a series of other salutes from around the city. And Max, just once again, President Trump will be the third U.S. president, I understand, to get this type of ceremonial pomp and circumstance.
Here we go.
There we go. Jared
Ivanka and Jared Kushner. And is that Tiffany?
No, I'm not quite sure who that is, to be honest. But that's a sight that the president will no doubt relish, because he had indicated he wanted a next generation meeting between his children and some of the heirs to the British throne. Max was reporting before that will not happen. At this point, Max, we don't expect any next generation meeting. On the other balcony, I should note, I did recognize the U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin taking photos with his phone. There he is. Or maybe they're selfies.
Yeah, also
from the balcony.
Woody Johnson as well there.
Okay, the U.S. ambassador.
Who's very close to the president, I'm told, as well.
So no next generation meeting, Max?
So this is interesting. Well, it's been made very clear to me that's not happening, certainly not in a formal sense. What you will see, I have been pointed out that, you will see Harry and William that came into this sort of suggestion at different events, but as part of other guests. So after this ceremonial welcome, Harry will be at this private lunch within the palace. Clearly Ivanka and Jared are there as well. And then Prince William will be at tonight's state banquet. So you can see the guard there lining up, and President Trump will be asked and invited along to sort of inspect the guard. We'll see how he copes with that this time. Didn't go particularly well last time. Before that, we'll hear the national anthems of the United States and also the United Kingdom as well. In the past, President Obama has spoken through the British national anthem, which was another faux pas. Literally, these events, even for British people, are littered with traps, social traps, because there's so much etiquette involved. it's a very simple way of looking at it, really, that the Queen takes precedence. She walks first, she starts the conversation, she holds her hand out if you want to shake hands. But actually, President Trump isn't committed to following any of these etiquette rules. He's not a British subject. And actually, on this event, he is on a par with the Queen. They're both heads of state, and this is a joint event as far as the British establishment is concerned.
And Clarissa, of course, we know that President Trump often doesn't follow with convention or orthodoxy or history. And that's part of what makes this interesting, so interesting to watch. We expect them to come out of these double doors momentarily to watch this ceremony.
Come out, and these are the Grenadier Guards, very well-regarded battalion.
The doors are opening.
Based here in the UK. Currently, actually, so you'll see them come out, and there'll be the national anthems played, and then President Trump will be invited to inspect the Guard there. So this is a very formal moment. It's celebrating the ties between the two countries, and it's particularly about military ties, this visit, showing that joint security and joint military is a way ahead, something we can all agree on, away from all of the horrible politics and perhaps those comments about Meghan Markle as well. This is about two countries coming together, shoulder to shoulder, two heads of state.
I can't see because the flag. Can you have the flag rocking you or not?
been watching President Trump and the Prince of Wales reviewing the Grenadier Guards outside Buckingham Palace. You've been listening to U.S. military songs. As Max Foster has pointed out, this is really about the military bonds between the two nations. And Max, just a couple of things here that are notable. Number one, people will remember that 1 year ago in July of 2018, when they reviewed the troops, it was President Trump with Queen Elizabeth. This time, he's doing it with the Prince of Wales. Is there significance in that, Max?
Well, I suspect the Queen might have got a little involved here on behalf of President Trump, because by allowing Prince Charles to take the president forward, there's a very clear seniority line there. So President of the United States would obviously be senior to the Prince of Wales, so he would go first. There wouldn't be the confusion that we had last time where he didn't know whether he should go before the Queen. So I suspect the Queen would have been involved in that decision to let the Prince of Wales host him. Also, it's quite unusual perhaps that the President would speak to members of the Guard, but you can see the senior member of the Guard, they're introducing him to members of the Guard, and that's because what they're trying to do here is really celebrate those US ties, and there are several individuals within this troop who have US ties. So the tourist on parade there is someone called Joshua Young Hastings. He's from the UK, but he actually went to an American university on a football scholarship. We also have Robert Spilling, who was born in St. Louis, Missouri, but has actually had a British father. He served in the American military, but also the British military. So very cleverly, they're accentuating the ties between the UK and the US and avoiding all of the divisiveness you were hearing about politically earlier in the program.
That's so interesting, Max. It is so interesting that, you have been our fly on the wall to be able to not lip read, but certainly tell us what that exchange of pleasantries, the context for it. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, it's unusual for the Guard to speak back. The fact that President Trump is going up and asking them questions, they're probably not accustomed to that.
I have to give him 10 out of 10 for that performance. This is a performance. This is part of Ceremonial. These are pictures which will last forever. He did it with enthusiasm. He did it correctly. And the Prince of Wales is actually very good in these situations to try to help people through. And by separating him from the Queen, they actually made it very easy. But do not be mistaken. The Queen is behind all of these decisions and is in utter control of this entire schedule.
And Max, we'll
now get the British national anthem, I understand.
Okay. If you're with us still. Max, one person we're not seeing today is Prince Philip, and there's a reason for that, correct?
Yeah, he's retired from official duties. He's 97, so he's stepped back completely. And actually, these are the moments where she probably misses him most. He's an expert in military protocols and in military history, and he would normally have taken the president along. So he's actually greatly missed in these moments. But gradually, as time moves on, she's getting more used to this role, and Prince Charles actually is stepping in as her primary consort in these situations. And that's part of what they call in the palace reign change. They don't necessarily like to talk about it, but all of these moments are all about getting ready for the next stage in British royalty and bringing Prince Charles in, so it won't be as much as a shock when he becomes king.
Abby, the optics of this are powerful. Watching these two countries stand together, shoulder to shoulder, for all of this ceremony. And as you have pointed out to us, the president really comes alive and enjoys all of this ceremony, as we saw 2 weeks ago, again, when he met the new emperor of Japan.
And he also really values the military symbolism of all of this, too. I think President Trump he speaks a lot about his support of the U.S. military, but I think he also likes the ceremony of it, the formality of it, and you can see him really standing tall and being solemn in the moments where he needs to be solemn. But just to add a little bit of color, I think a lot of times when people experience President Trump in these kinds of environments, they come away surprised by how funny he is and how lighthearted he can be at certain moments. And I think that it should not come as a surprise that even as President Trump can be abrasive in other situations, in moments like this, he can be quite jovial. Those conversations that you saw him having with those soldiers who were standing there, having those conversations, they were laughing, they were talking and smiling. That's not uncommon because he really does come alive in moments like this, and I think he enjoys the military aspect of this. It's as important to him as the part that is about him being celebrated as a U.S. leader as well. And I think he's just taking it all in. You can see it on his face. He's standing here, he's watching it. This is obviously not something that he's used to, and he's taking his cues from the people he needs to take his cues from. And First Lady Melania Trump, also in moments like this, really studies the role that she's supposed to play. My colleague Kate Bennett has been writing about how Melania has worked really hard to figure out the protocol behind all of the things that she's supposed to do here. And I think even her outfit, everything from top to bottom is designed for her to just fit in really nicely in something that is otherwise, I think, quite unfamiliar to both of them.
And I do have a bit of a fashion update for people wondering.
Oh.
Melania Trump is wearing a custom white crepe dress with navy details by Italian fashion house Dolce & Gabbana.
Thank you, John.
The hat is from her personal designer wardrobe advisor, Hervé Pierre, who also designed the white hat she wore last year during the state visit of the Macrons to the White House. People might remember that white hat. And it has been noted by careful observers of this,
Yes.
that when you have the First Lady and the Duchess of Cornwall right there, Camilla, wearing white, Ivanka Trump is also wearing white.
Yes, but the Queen is branching out on her own with a mint number.
It's kind of wild when you think
Yes.
about it.
Well, she, as you know, the Queen has been known lately to wear bold, bright pastels. That's sort of her signature. And all the leaders, the Queen and President Trump and the First Lady, as well as the Duchess of Cornwall and Prince Charles, are going in now for a private lunch, which will start in about half an hour.
Max, you give him high grades, the president high grades for hitting all the marks he needed to hit. And I have to say, whenever I see this type of thing, I always wonder, how's an American supposed to know what to do with all this formality?
Oh, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare for Brits. I mean, it's literally very difficult indeed. But he followed direction, and what you did, you saw the senior guardsman, also the Prince of Wales, making sure he knew what he was doing all the time, leading him through, whilst allowing him to look very stately at the same time. I thought it was very cleverly done by the Queen and very cleverly done by President Trump as well. In the next half hour, he'll be presented with a range of artifacts from the royal collection, some extraordinary things in there. You'll see some portraits probably of previous presidents. We'll be able to tell you more about what they're going to see a bit later on. But I know that they've got a copy of the Declaration of Independence as well in there. So that's again really showing off these ties between the two countries, showing that these are two key allies. And they will also exchange gifts. The Queen thinks very carefully about the gifts she presents to foreign heads of state. And I think, Winston Churchill was her first Prime Minister all those years ago. And then a very clever gift will probably be something relating to Winston Churchill, something original from him, her first Prime Minister, who she looked up to. And I know that President Trump looks up to too.
All right, so here, this is an historic moment. Queen Elizabeth II is showing President Trump and the First Lady all around Buckingham Palace. This is a room filled with artifacts. It's known as the Royal Gift Collection. They are taking a look at this. This is part of his official UK state visit. Again, only the third American president that Queen Elizabeth has had for an official state visit. Let's listen in for a moment. All right, so we can't really hear what the president is saying, but you have the Queen there showing him again. These are the royal gift collection, some from America to the UK on this visit. Max Foster is with me as well. Max, talk to us a little bit about the significance of this and what we're seeing.
Well, I think there's a couple of things confused here. They've just exchanged gifts, so that's one thing. I don't know what the president's side is given, but certainly the Queen, I can tell you that she's given a book, a Churchill book, to President Trump. It's the Second World War by Winston Churchill, a bridged version, first edition. So he's a big fan of Churchill, and Churchill was actually the Queen's first Prime Minister, would you believe, all those years ago when she was just in her 20s. Separately, they are viewing artifacts from the Royal Collection which refer to the United States. So each of the little sections you'll see there has been broken down into different topics. So you've got the tale of two Georges, George III and George Washington, and he'll be shown the Declaration of Independence that comes out of the British Archive, and some engraved portraits as well of George Washington, for example. Another section will be about Scottish links. Obviously he is of Scottish ancestry. He's very, very proud of that, which is why he thinks the UK, the British public, have a better connection with him than previous presidents. He'll be seeing a bolt of Harris tweed, which is obviously typically Scottish, and there'll be other sections as well. Side tables, I'm told, is one section, a gift from President Trump following tea at Windsor, which was last year. So all the key elements of the Royal Collection which refer to the United States, all about emphasising the close links between the two countries.
It is, and it's just so interesting, Max, I think, to watch this again. You just noted the Queen has given President Trump an abridged first edition of the Second World War by Winston Churchill, described by the Buckingham Palace press office as crimson with gold tool decoration, an outer cover spine and an inner cover, etc. I mean, this is all pomp and circumstance. This is a significant official UK state visit for this president. But at the same time, this comes amid jabs, sparring between the Mayor of London and President Trump. Let's get to that in a moment, but let's try to listen. I think we can hear a bit, Max.
Hard to put, sir. And this is a Harris tweed from the other blue. And Edward VIII and plain gold. I think +4 of that
right down there. You can take that to do it, and we'll show
Okay, Max Foster joins me again as we watch these pictures. It just such a stark contrast, Max, between the protests on the streets of London, the jabs between President Trump and the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and then these images of this official state visit to the UK.
It really is. I mean, the table they're looking at now, for example, I saw them leaning into the image. It's a well-known image, a photograph of King George VI arriving at the US Capitol building. He was leaning over there, this 5-volume specially bound set of Roosevelt speeches presented to King George VI. These are key artifacts in the British collection, but obviously very close to the president's heart as well, United States heart as well. So it really is about trying to find the common links. And this is what the Queen is there for. You know, she won't be too concerned about the political shenanigans here in the United Kingdom. It's pretty clear British politics is broken right now. This is when she needs to step up and represent the country, show continuity, represent the United Kingdom and place it within history and not caught up in the here and now and managing and avoiding letting current problems and tensions play into the wider narrative between the two countries. He's also looking up there to this very famous, arguably the finest art collection in the world, which belongs to the Queen, hanging there in the picture gallery in Buckingham Palace. It's a hugely sort of impressive room. I'm sure Donald Trump is very impressed by it as well. You can see Ivanka Trump following behind as well, being given the same commentary as well. It's interesting. Obviously, she's a senior advisor, but also she's part of the family, and it's interesting that Donald Trump has involved his family so keenly in this visit as well.
Yes, you see Prince Charles and Camilla there as well. We're learning a little bit more about the gift exchanges. In addition to that book by Winston Churchill, the president was also given this 3-piece pen set made exclusively for the Queen. The First Lady, Melania Trump, was given, we're told, a specially commissioned silver box.
This is a different side of President Trump that a lot of people often get to see, and it's just the sort of thing that I think some in his staff don't think he gets to do quite enough of, but he enjoys it so much because I think he enjoys being treated with this kind of respect, and when he has his chance, the types of world leaders that he brings to the United States and treats with a similar kind of pomp and circumstance, that is a sign of how much he respects them. So it's very much mutual, Jim and Poppy, just the way that how meaningful this is to him.
Absolutely. Abby Phillip, thank you, Max Foster. We appreciate it. With us now, our chief international correspondent, Christian Amanpour, and our European affairs commentator, Dominic Thomas. Christian, to you, just building on what Abby said about, this pomp and circumstance and the respect for the Queen, etc. I remember when the president talked, he told the Times of London, I think it was about a year or so ago, about how much his mother loved the Queen and had great respect for the Queen. And clearly he is enjoying this visit. Only the third president under this Queen, the third U.S. president, to have this official UK state visit. What stands out to you?
Well, look, first and foremost, this is the second time in 2 years that the president has got such wonderful pomp and circumstance from the Queen. And I think that is really remarkable. And I don't recall any other world leader who's had these 2 visits, 2 summers running, of such incredible detail, attention to detail, and real Britain showing its respect and its historic transatlantic alliance with the American president and with the presidency and with the United States itself. We're seeing them now walking into the Westminster Abbey. They'll be shown around by Prince Andrew, who's the Queen's 3rd child, her 2nd son, and he had his marriage in Westminster Abbey to Sarah Ferguson. They're no longer married, but they had their wedding there. Very interesting that the president will be, obviously, as many do, putting a wreath of respect around the tomb of the unknown warrior. And also, we heard from you, Jim, that he will be visiting the tomb of Stephen Hawking. This is also a big deal and caught me a little bit by surprise, because what is Stephen Hawking if not the repository of facts, of science, of evidence, and the real-based world, which the president is often taking pot shots at. So I think that's a really important moment to know that he's going to be putting a wreath there. And I think it's really important also that this visit is happening at a time where we will be commemorating in just 3 days the historic D-Day landing, 75 years since General Eisenhower was the commander of the naval fleet that took off from Portsmouth and then basically invaded occupied France and started the beginning of the end of the Nazi domination of Europe. It's a massively important time. And for those who want to look, fondly and with positivity on the relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom, it couldn't be more fortuitous, this timing. And then, of course, you have all the other stuff around it that we can talk about if you like, the politics.
Dominic Thomas with us as well. We should note that Westminster Abbey is a resting place for many prominent Britons. Stephen Hawking, of course, Charles Darwin, Mary Queen of Scots, and as Christian noted, of course, the tomb of the unknown soldier, so topical right now. Dominic Thomas, this is a good trip for the American president. He enjoys the welcome. He enjoys the pomp and circumstance.
Christian, what strikes me is for this America First president, right, how important our allies are. And he knows that, and he's making this visit as part of that. Your great interview with German Chancellor Angela Merkel just last week showed that as well. Let's get to that in a moment, but let's listen.
As the President contemplates the unknown warrior, on the pillar to the left of our picture hangs the Congressional Medal of Honor given by the people.
Okay.
At the grave of the unknown warrior, as it is known there, that remembers all who died in the First World War. And as Christian mentioned, of course, the importance of that, just days before the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings, where the President will also make a visit later on this trip.
Yeah, he will. Christian, your thoughts?
Well, look, he does enjoy these somber and historic moments, and who could not be reflective when they stand inside Westminster Abbey? It's known as the Queen's Church. It is the repository of so many historic figures, both militarily, both in terms of statesmen, both in terms of scientists, as we've seen, and just the big, huge, towering figures throughout the hundreds and hundreds of years of British civilization that they've just been, putting those people to rest there. You're seeing him with the Dean of Westminster Abbey there, and also to the left of the screen, Prince Andrew, who, as I said, is the Queen's third child, her second son, and who himself was a military pilot of helicopters during the Falkland War. So that's the early 80s. He has some military experience himself, as does, of course, Prince Harry, who is not there, but as we remember, he fought in Afghanistan. And the whole military tradition is huge with the British royal family. That is what they do. They go to officer school when they graduate from high school, and that is the sort of the framework with which they conduct their public service. Certainly the men, and we know also Princess Anne as well has a certain role in that regard. And the Queen herself was helping out and in uniform during the home battle during World War II. But I think, look, you have a situation now where Britain, as its role on the international stage, will diminish because of Brexit, as it unhooks itself from all the powerful alliances and trade deals and intelligence and military and all these other issues that makes Britain so punch above its weight for so many decades since the Second World War. Now it's going to be diminished slightly on the world stage. So it needs to keep a massively close relationship with the great big uncle over the seas, who is historically the provider of security for the transatlantic alliance.
And I think the protocol, there's so much has been made of protocol, and really it's there just to offer guidelines. It's there to sort of tell people, to give people an idea of what to expect. But if something goes wrong, it's not going to be a big issue. And I think it's quite interesting because last year on this working visit to the UK, Trump was much maligned for supposedly breaking protocol because he didn't bow to the Queen. Well, foreign heads of state don't bow to each other. It was also suggested he kept the Queen waiting. He didn't. So I think in this
she was early or something.
She was early. I mean, I think the fact fact that she glanced at her watch made everyone think, oh, he's late, he's messed up again. He didn't. She was in the right place, he was on time. In situations like today, I think we can see that Donald Trump clearly wants to do very well by the royal family. It's really the only instance in which I've seen him ever be deferential. He's had public disputes with the London mayor, he's had public disputes with Theresa May, but as far as the Queen goes, and now by extension Prince Charles, he seems to be doing reasonably well. Now there's still time, of course, we've got the state banquet this evening, but anything can go wrong for anybody. When Obama attended his state banquet, he started speaking right as the national anthem started playing.
That was super awkward to watch play out when I saw that video again.
Yes. So at the end of the day, everybody is human, mistakes are okay, but I think really what would be most interesting behind closed doors is not whether or not he's stirring his tea in the correct fashion, it's what kind of climate change conversations are going on.
Here we've got it. We've been waiting. Live pictures. There's the Queen, President Trump, and there she is, First Lady Melania Trump. These are the first photos as everyone has been waiting to get their eye on them before this state dinner. The rolled carpet has clearly been rolled out by the royals. So let's go straight into what we're seeing and messages that this is sitting and how this dinner has taken so long just to prepare for. Max Foster and Kate Bennett are in front of Buckingham Palace for me. And as we stay on these pictures, Max and Kate, tell me more about the choice of dress and the preparation.
Well, this for a lot of royal fans, this is what it's all about. It's tiaras and it's ball gowns and it's white tie. So, well, I'm going to let Kate take away the fashion commentary.
Melania Trump's her dress is not strapless, but it's sleeveless, and she's wearing white, which is actually Michelle Obama wore a white gown for her state banquet at the palace when she was here several years ago. I mean, it's simple. She wore white earlier today. I don't know if there's any symbolism of the color white.
I think it's white tie event. The Queen's wearing white. You know, white is the theme for the evening. We do have the menu.
Yeah, we do have the menu. So the first course will be the steamed fillet of halibut, Brooke. Main course, a saddle of new season Windsor lamb with herb stuffing, spring vegetables, and port sauce. And for dessert, strawberry sable. I don't know what that is, with lemon verbena cream. So not Donald Trump's typical steak and ice cream sundae, which was on a lot of the menus. If you remember their trip to Japan last week, a lot of the food that they ate there was meat and potatoes. This is not that.
Always interesting as well, Brooke, the seating plan. So obviously the Queen will be sitting next to Donald Trump. We've got all of Mr. Trump's the adult children as well, and 16 members of the royal family. So we know that Charles is next to Mrs. Trump, Camilla's on the other side of the president, and next to Woody Johnson, who's the ambassador. Looking down, we can see that Ivanka is sitting with the Countess of Wessex, Sophie, and Kate is next to Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, of course. So these are very carefully sort of prepared seating plans. The only person that won't have their name on their place will be the Queen. That's a long tradition.
And the 4 days it took to set this table, Brooke, it looks like job well done.
Well,
I mean, don't they, you guys?
I look at that moment,
Don't they measure? I mean, every chair to the table, to the forks and the knives and the plates, it is precise.
Yeah, so each plate is exactly 18 inches, 45 centimetres apart. They measure it with these sticks, and every chair an equal distance from the table as well. And the same goes for the hundreds of glasses as well, all over the table. And they walk in, move the chairs, pick up a glass.
I'm delighted
toast time.
to welcome you and Mrs. Trump to Buckingham Palace this evening. Just 12 months after our first meeting at Windsor. Visits by American presidents always remind us of the close and long-standing friendship between the United Kingdom and the United States. And I'm so glad that we have another opportunity to demonstrate the immense importance that both our countries attach to our relationship. In the coming days, you will see some of our most treasured historical buildings, speak to the business leaders whose expertise and innovation drive our economies, and meet members of our armed services, past and present. You will also travel to Portsmouth and Normandy to commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day. On that day, and on many occasions since, the armed forces of both our countries fought side by side to defend our cherished values of liberty and democracy. Mr. President, in your State of the Union address this year, you paid tribute to some of the American heroes who risked their lives. And we owe an immeasurable debt to the British, American, and Allied soldiers who began the liberation of Europe on the 6th of June, 1944. I paid my first state visit to your country at the invitation of President Eisenhower. As Supreme Allied Commander, he had ultimate responsibility for the execution of the Normandy landings. In his headquarters in St. James's Square, not far from Buckingham Palace, British and American officers worked closely together to plan the freedom of a continent. And it would be no exaggeration to say that millions of lives depended on their common endeavor. As we face the new challenges of the 21st century, the anniversary of D-Day reminds us of all that our countries have achieved together. After the shared sacrifices of the Second World War, Britain and the United States worked with other allies to build an assembly of international institutions to ensure that the horrors of conflict would never be repeated. While the world has changed, we are forever mindful of the original purpose of these structures, nations working together to safeguard a hard-won peace. Of course, it is not only our security which unites us, but our strong cultural links and shared heritage. Every year, there are almost 4 million visits by Americans to the United Kingdom, with a great number claiming British descent. And with your own Scottish ancestry, Mr. President, you too have a particular connection to this country. We are also bound by the strength and breadth of our economic ties as the largest investors in each other's economies. British companies in the United States employ over 1 million Americans, and the same is true vice versa. Mr. President, as we look to the future, I'm confident that our common values and shared interests will continue to unite us. Tonight we celebrate an alliance that has helped to ensure the safety and prosperity of both our peoples for decades, and which I believe will endure for many years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you all to rise and drink a toast to President and Mrs. Trump, to the continued friendship between our two nations, and to the health, prosperity, and happiness of the people of the United States.
Your Majesty, Melania and I are profoundly honored to be your guests for this historic state visit. Thank you for your warm welcome, for this beautiful weather, your gracious hospitality, and Your Majesty's nearly 7 decades of treasured friendship with the United States of America. This week, we commemorate a mighty endeavor of righteous nations and one of the greatest undertakings in all of history. 75 years ago, more than 150,000 Allied troops were preparing on this island to parachute into France, storm the beaches of Normandy, and win back our civilization. As Her Majesty remembers, the British people had hoped and prayed and fought for this day for nearly 5 years. When Britain stood alone during the Blitz of 1940 and 1941, the Nazi war machine dropped thousands of bombs on this country and right on this magnificent city. Buckingham Palace alone was bombed on 16 separate occasions. In that dark hour, the people of this nation showed the world what it means to be British. They cleared wreckage from the streets, displayed the Union Jack from their shattered homes, and kept fighting on to victory. They only wanted victory. The courage of the United Kingdom's sons and daughters ensured that your destiny would always remain in your own hands. Through it all, the royal family was the resolute face of the Commonwealth's unwavering solidarity. In April 1945, newspapers featured a picture of the Queen Mother visiting the women's branch of the Army, watching a young woman repair a military truck engine. That young mechanic was the future Queen, a great, great woman. Her Majesty inspired her compatriots in that fight to support the troops, defend her homeland, and defeat the enemy at all cost. We also pay tribute to Prince Philip's distinguished and valiant service in the Royal Navy during the Second World War. On D-Day, the Queen's beloved father, King George VI, delivered a stirring national address. That day he said, after nearly 5 years of toil and suffering, we must renew that crusading impulse on which we entered the war and met its darkest hour. Our fight is against evil and for a world in which goodness and honor may be the foundation of the life of men in every land. This evening, we thank God for the brave sons of the United Kingdom and the United States who defeated the Nazis and the Nazi regime and liberated millions from tyranny. The bond between our nations was forever sealed in that great crusade. As we honor our shared victory and heritage, we affirm the common values that will unite us long into the future: freedom, sovereignty, self-determination, the rule of law, and reverence for the rights given to us by Almighty God. From the Second World War to today, Her Majesty has stood as a constant symbol of these priceless traditions. She has embodied the spirit of dignity, duty, and patriotism that beats proudly in every British heart. On behalf of all Americans, I offer a toast to the eternal friendship of our people, the vitality of our nations, and to the long-cherished and truly remarkable reign of Her Majesty, the Queen. Thank you. Thank you.